Good morning, everyone. Give me just a second. I realize I messed something up. I forgot to set up the Facebook stream. Give me just 1 second. This should not take me long. Give me just a minute to take care of this. I apologize for being a little bit late today. Daylight savings time happened, and turns out all my clocks were wrong by not an hour, but by 3 minutes. So I was a little bit behind, but that's A-okay. Because this is an impromptu thing. We can do whatever we want. It's always nice to be able to do whatever we want. All right. I think we're all up and running. Good. Good. Sometimes everything is just good. Okay. Last night, 2 players at the World Poker Tour Final Table were wearing PokerCoaching.com patches. Actually, funny enough, you see this patch. Normally you take this and you put it on your shirt like this, right? Take a look at this. You see how the .com is slightly smaller than the rest of the text? Wouldn't think that's a big deal, right? Apparently, Fox, which airs the World Poker Tour, said that the .com has to be the same size as the rest of the coaching word. 3 days before the final table. These things take like a month to get for some reason. So, fortunately, social media expert extraordinaire, Justin is in Vegas. He went and had them made on the spot, and they fixed the problem. So, last night at the World Poker Tour Final Table, we had proper .com patches. They didn't look quite as good as this one, but I mean, it's okay. They got it done last second. We'd already agreed to pay the players a decent amount of money, so we really needed to get it done. So we had to have these made last second. 2 players were wearing them. Shannon Shore, who was my best man at my wedding, my oldest poker friend, or one of my oldest poker friends, and also Frank the Tank, who's known for his alcohol consumption. Turns out Shannon Shore took second, Frank the Tank won, so we picked well. Tonight, on the final table for Borgata, we have Ian wearing the patch as well. With any luck, he might as well win too. People are saying they want a patch. I'll tell you what I'll do. If you're at the World Series of Poker, I can leave some at the D&B booth, because I have a whole pile of these, where apparently you can't wear them on Fox. Here's all my patches. This is a whole box full of patches. So yeah. Everyone's always asking about hats. Where can we get hats? Here's a poker coaching hat. Where can we get shirts? This is a poker coaching mock-up shirt. This is a polo shirt. I think we're going to do t-shirts though. I think most people like t-shirts. Anyway, that's that. These are all trials. Here's look, this is my office, right? Here are all these clothes of the floor. These are all of you said you wanted clothes, so look. We're trying to get the clothes ready to go. Can we mail a patch to the United Kingdom? No. I am not going to personally mail any of these patches because that takes a ton of work and a ton of time. And for those of you who know me, you know I don't have a ton of time and I only marginally like doing work. Maybe we can figure that out at some point though. So anyway, we've been working on that. Anyway, congrats to Frank and Shannon for winning. We had 2 players in the final table and they took first and second. What more do you want out of it, huh? Thin hoodies, please. Yeah, certainly an idea. Let's see. Brian says, you're the guy that was asking for advice last week, and you said you should already have studied, and my wife said that I was rude. Well, you won first place. Ha ha! Good job, Brian. Maybe you'd already studied. You got $29,000 off a $10 investment. All right, good. How do I feel about WPT delaying their final tables? I think it's perfectly fine and reasonable. Congrats, Brian. I'm glad that you studied ahead of time. And the advice you needed was don't freak out. You already studied. You're good to go. Today, speaking of being good to go, we are going to talk about how to play against people when they lead into you. First things first, what does lead into mean? Lead into, at least in my vernacular and in the vernacular of most good pros or all good pros, essentially means to bet into the aggressor on the bet into the person who was the aggressor on the previous betting round. Okay? So pre-flop, say I raise, you call the big blind, you bet. You are leading into me because I was the aggressor. If it goes check, check on the flop, and then you bet on the turn, that is not a lead because no one bet the previous round. So there cannot be a lead on the turn when it goes check, check on the flop. Same thing as on the turn. Say I raise, pre-flop, you call big blind, I continuation bet flop. You call, turn goes check, check, you bet the river. That is not a lead. It's only a lead if it goes check, bet, call on the turn, and then I bet the river. And then you bet into me on the river. So there must be an aggressor on the previous betting round. Okay, that is what a lead is. Some people call these donk bets, but we try to not be derogatory towards our opponents because that is not kind and nice. So, these are called leads. Will you see me in Europe soon? Probably not. I am staying in America for the time being. There's enough here for me to do. So first things first, let's talk about the first spot people can lead. That is on the flop. The most common instance that we will discuss, we're not going to discuss every instance, but the most common instance is when you do raise pre-flop, big blind calls, they bet into you on the flop. That is called a lead. So first things first, when do you want to lead? When does it make sense from a fundamentally sound point of view? The only time it makes any sense whatsoever, you can confirm this using all the solvers, is when the flop is very good for your range, right? So when is the flop good for the big blind's calling range and better than the initial raiser's range? Well, ideally, usually it's going to be medium and low card boards, often very coordinated, like 8-7-4, right? In that scenario, the big blind can have all the straights, all the two pairs, whereas the middle position raiser probably doesn't have any of that, right? So, in that scenario, that player has what is referred to as the range advantage, but also, not just the range advantage, the nut advantage. They have way more straight hands, straights and sets and whatnot, than the initial raiser. So, that's the spot where leading makes sense. On the later betting rounds, if you know for some reason, let's say your opponent has lots of draws in their range, it's hard to know that, but say you do assume that and the draw misses, you can also lead the turn. Say you know your range contains a lot of draws because you didn't check raise them on the flop. Like let's say the flop comes Queen Jack 3. That's a board where you really should not be raising all that often. Let's say it's Queen Jack 3, 2 hearts. Turn brings another heart or a card like a 9 or a card like an 8. Those are reasonable spots to lead too because you should not be check raising King 10 on Queen Jack 3 because that board is going to connect very well with the initial raiser, right? We discuss all this over at pokercoaching.com, by the way. If this is a little bit too advanced, go there, go through the past homework challenges. You can get a completely free trial, and these topics will become much more common and standard to you. Like, you'll understand them. You'll understand the reasons for leading and whatnot. Okay, so you always want to ask, what is my opponent's range? If the opponent is good, they'll be leading with a very balanced range of the best made hands and the draws. And that's it. You do not want to lead with marginal made hands because when you lead with marginal made hands, that usually results in your opponents playing perfectly. They're going to fold their garbage, which you're crushing, and they're going to continue with their best hands and their draws, which you're not crushing. So that is a big, big problem. Now, of course, if you can just lead and make your opponent fold too often, leading becomes pretty sweet. But most people, at least if they're good, realize that. So, when the random recreational player leads, it will almost always be with one of these 4 types of hands, okay? Either draws, nuts, marginal made hands, or just total air. Quite often, you're going to find that most people lead with only one of those, not all of those, right? So if you find if you're against an opponent who leads with only the nuts, like sets and 2 pairs, just fold everything besides draws, right? Life's easy. What if they lead with mostly draws? Well, you should raise pretty much everything and keep blasting it, especially whenever the obvious draws don't come in. What if they lead with junk? Well, raise with all your bluffs, call with all of your good hands that they're drawing thin against. And what if they lead with marginal made hands? You should often bluff a lot, or you should call with your hands that beat them because you don't want to raise and let them off the hook. Now, some people, when they lead with a marginal made hand, like say it comes 9-6-3 and they bet, they're going to have a range of like 9-8, ace-6, pocket 7s, etc. If they're going to fold those to aggression, you want to be blasting them because you're just going to win the pot every time, right? But if they're going to be calling you down, well, now you want to primarily fold out your garbage and continue only with good value hands. And you want to raise them with your good value hands because you're just printing equity, right? So in general, that's what you're going to want to do on the flop. If your opponents are good, though, which is where it gets difficult, you usually want to defend at the minimum defense frequency or perhaps a tiny bit less. And that's because when they lead, they are saying they have the range advantage and the nut advantage. If they have the range advantage and the nut advantage, then you should be very cautious, right? So what is the minimum defense frequency? Minimum defense frequency is 1 minus your opponent's bet divided by their bet plus the pot. So let's say they pot it, right? Say the pot's $65. You made it $30 pre-flop. They called. There's small blind in there, so 30 plus 30 is 60 plus 5. You're playing 5-10. Flop comes 9-6-3. They pot it. They bet $65. In that scenario, what is the minimum defense frequency? Take a second, figure it out. Well, it is 1 minus 1 pot size bet divided by the pot plus 1 pot size bet. So that's 50%. 1 minus 50% is 50%. So you need to defend with half of your range. Okay? Ideally, all the hands in your range are getting the proper pot odds, which means they're going to realize 33% equity or more. Okay? 2 concepts happening there. Next, what if your opponent half pots it? Just as another example. It would be 1 minus 0.5 divided by 1, which is the pot, plus 0.5. So that's 1 minus 0.33, which equals 67%. So you need to defend with 67% of your range. If you think about your range, right, knowing that you're usually going to have a pair or better only 33% of the time, but you need to defend 67% of the time, well, that can become quite a problem, right? So this is why leading is sometimes good if your opponents overfold, and maybe people overfold, especially in the small and medium stakes. But if your opponents are good, you need to defend at roughly the minimum defense frequency. And sometimes that is hard to do. And when I say defend, that doesn't necessarily mean raise. That means it doesn't necessarily mean call. It means call or raise. You need to continue, right? And that's usually going to result in you raising a lot of draws, raising some nut hands, and calling with a lot of marginal stuff. So, that's all relevant. D. Nelson says, just remember those numbers instead of doing the math. Well, you need to remember all of the rough, the common spots, like what happens if they lead 0.25% pot. 0.25 divided by 1.25 is 20%, so that would be 80% you have to defend. And, you can just figure out 0.33, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.75, etc., etc. So, against good players who have a range of premium made hands and draws, which is what they very often should have, you don't really want to raise because then you're just putting money in debt against the premium made hands. And calling is kind of dicey because the draws usually aren't putting their money in too far behind, which is why if you are going to be betting in general, not just leading, but betting in general, you want to have a polarized range because if your opponents raise, sometimes they're screwed, and if they call, sometimes they're screwed. And that's exactly what you want. Harris says, are these books in Mastering? They are. All of this is covered extensively in Mastering Small Stakes No Limit Hold'em. Check it out at jonathanlittlepoker.com/mastering. Okay? Go get it. If you've not studied it, you're missing out. This is a big book. It's not an easy book, but it's an in-depth guide that explains how to play your ranges. As you see, this is just all range analysis, right? All right, let's see. If you have a leading range, how do you protect your checking range? Well, John, if you're leading with some of the best made hands and some of the draws, not all of them, your checking range is also some of the best made hands, a lot of marginal made hands, and some junk and some draws, right? So you need to make sure that listen, whenever you're leading on like 9-6-3, it should be literally 9-6, pocket sixes, pocket threes, and maybe pocket nines. Some of that. Maybe hands like tens or jacks if you have it, but probably not. And then you're also going to be leading with some bluffs. So your checking range is still going to be ace-9, king-9, queen-9, jack-9, 10-9, right? Still a pretty good amount of decent hands. And also you still get to check raise sometimes. Like on 9-6-3, you can perhaps lead with hands like 10-8 for a gut shot, but check raise hands like 8-7 for an open-ended. So you do need to figure out ahead of time, like how do you protect your range, and that is very important, and we discuss that thoroughly in that book, and also at pokercoaching.com. All right, let's see. We have a hand. Hopefully it deals with a lead. You have ace-2 of hearts and low jack. You raise to 35. Button calls. This does not have to deal with leading. Flop comes ace-6-5. You check. Button raises. Button cannot raise. Button can only bet, Mike. No one bet the flop. He bets 80, you call, turns an 8, check, check. There was a jack, you check, he goes all in for 140 big blinds. Fold, clearly, for infinite. All right, next. That's how you deal with flop leads. You consider sitting to the immediate right of a hyper-aggressive player. Yes, that's exactly what you should... Oh, no, to the right? No, you want to sit on the left. You always want aggressive people on your left. If they are on your right, you do have plays available to you. We discussed this recently, how to play against a maniac on A Little Coffee. So go back and watch that on youtube.com/floattheturn. But, no, ideally, you want the maniacs on your right. But it can still be perfectly fine to have them on your left. All right, when else can your opponents lead? Well, they can raise pre-flop, you can 3-bet, and then they can call, and then they'll lead into you on the flop sometimes, but that almost never happens. You may ask, why does that almost never happen? Because their range is almost always just fairly dominated by your good 3-betting range. So that scenario almost never comes up, so we're not going to talk about that today. Next, on the turn. You usually don't see a whole lot of leading on the turn, but there are some spots where it does take place. The main time people are going to lead the turn is when the draws come in, especially like junky draws, and then also when the bottom or the middle card pairs. Because think about this, right? Say I raise pre-flop, big blind calls, flop comes Jack 6-3 or Jack 10-6. They check, you bet, they call, turns a 6. Jack 10-6 is a good example where the pre-flop raiser should continuation bet almost every time. And unless they have a very marginal made hand, like a 10 or a 6. Those are hands that you would likely check behind. Plus, you don't have too many 6s in your range, right? Just opening from earlier middle position. Whereas the big blind's going to call with a lot of 6s pre-flop and check call with all of them on the flop, right? So in that scenario, big blind has way more 6s than the pre-flop raiser. So because of that, big blind should consider leading in those scenarios, right? So you'll see good players lead in those spots, often very small, with their 6s, or bottom trips, whatever that is, and some of the junky draws. That remember, you should not check raise the draws on the flop on Jack 10-6, just because it's so easy for your opponent to have a very good hand there. So that's the range they'll usually lead in that scenario. That's mainly it. So how do you combat that? Again, if they're going to be leading with a balanced range of premium made hands and draws, it's pretty tough to play against. You just have to call with your good stuff at the minimum defense frequency. It's brutal. If they're going to be leading with a lot of marginal stuff, you'll see some people lead their middle pairs for no reason, or their top pairs because they want to get protection or something like that. Again, figure out what they do wrong and exploit them. You're going to find not as many people lead with garbage on the turn because they don't check call the flop with garbage. Like say it comes Jack 10-6. They're not going to check call you with ace 2 offsuit, right? And then lead it on the turn. It just doesn't happen. So the ranges when they lead the turn are usually going to be much stronger in general. It's usually going to be either premium hands, marginal hands, or draws. And again, you can sort of pay attention to which boards they are leading on. So if they're leading whenever a lot of draws come in, that's very different than if they lead when the bottom cards pair, which is usually what most good people do. Other times people lead is like, say, a good people will lead is, say it comes like 9-6-3, turns in 10, 8, or 7, or 5. That's a situation where they may not raise or check raise all their draws on the flop because there's so many of them. So they get to lead sometimes. And also you don't know if those randomly make them 2 pair or bad pair with a draw. And it's a pretty tough spot, right? So anyway, you want to figure out what your opponents do wrong. And if they're leading with both premium hands and draws, it's not a great spot for you because their range is nice and balanced a lot of the time. But if they are leading with one particular type of hand, you can crush them. K. Waki says, I help you improve your game. Well, thank you. I'm glad that you're here working hard. You only have 3 buy-ins, separate of your life expenses. What should you do? Get more money. Get a job and get more money. I had a job when I started. Most people do that. Also, play smaller. You're allowed to play smaller, Just because 1-2 is the smallest game in the casino doesn't mean that that's the game you have to hop into. Go read jonathanlittlepoker.com/bankroll. You need to get a decent bankroll. Or just realize you're gambling, right? Clint says, for all these small stakes players, it goes, you raise pre-flop, it goes call, big blind calls. So say, we are not really discussing multi-way spots yet, but say it is very multi-way. First off, you should be more inclined to lead because betting for protection has more merit, right? Because you have to fade a lot more draws. Like, say it goes raise, call, comes 9-6-3. If big blind has a hand like king 9, it's reasonable to lead. And that's just because if it checks through, ace 9 is almost always not going to be good on the turn. So that is relevant. How much do you need to play 1-2 no limit? Go read jonathanlittlepoker.com/bankroll. It'll answer all of your bankroll questions. So multi-way, you do need to just presume someone has something when they are leading, because leading with just total garbage is ridiculous. Very multi-way, because you're just going to get demolished, because someone's going to have something a lot of the time. But yeah, we're not going to talk about multi-way so much. Typically multi-way people just have stronger ranges because they're betting into everyone. Okay, on the river. What do we do on the river? Usually people lead on the river when the flush cards come in or the straight cards come in. And usually, if they're good, they're balanced. However, almost no one is balanced. If no one is balanced, then you need to figure out what they are doing. And typically, the more loose and aggressive a player is, the more likely they are to be over-bluffing. The more tight and passive they are, the more likely they are to be value betting. Now, again, if they're balanced, it doesn't really matter what you do. But if they are skewed one way or the other, you can really exploit them. Again, if they are... if you don't know what they're doing, but you know they're probably doing something wrong, you should just defend at the minimum defense frequency. So again, on the river, if they pot it, call with half your range. And there you go. That will often, that will fix the problem. And, say you need to call 50% of your range, realize that you need to call the correct 50% of your range. In that scenario, say the flush card came in, you often want to have blockers to the good flushes. So say you have like King of Hearts in your hand and there are 3 hearts on the board, the third heart came on the river. Having the King of Hearts in your hand blocks a lot of their value combinations, because their value combinations are presumably flushes, and their bluffs are other weak stuff. So in that scenario, when you beat the weak stuff, but lose to the flushes, you can be more inclined to call with hands with blockers, even if they are slightly weaker. Like, middle pair with a good blocker is almost always better than top pair with no blocker in those spots when you are calling. Your big stack in the tournament, on the button, ace-7 of diamonds, flop comes. 4-3-2, you raise 3 flops, small blind goes all in for 50 big blinds. Would we call? Probably not. It's a pretty crappy spot. You always have to ask, would my opponent be jamming with draws? If they're jamming with draws, then you just have to call because you beat all the draws. If they're never jamming with draws, then you should fold because you have 40-ish% equity. Maybe a little bit more, maybe not. Realize your gut shot may be dead already. Realize some of your flush shots may not be clean. So you should probably fold unless your opponent's... I mean, to be fair, if someone's good, they're not going to be jamming there. So that's all relevant. What's the best book you should get? What's the first one? Listen, this presumes you know how to play poker. You played some hands. This book, Mastering Small Stakes No Limit Hold'em. This will get you up to speed. You can get it at jonathanlittlepoker.com/mastering. How much for private coaching? $500 per hour. I purposefully try to not do a whole lot of private coaching. I turn down most people who come to me. And that's just because I would rather help all of you for an hour instead of help one person for 1 hour. Does our site have videos for micro stakes players? Yes. But to be fair, realize micro stakes aren't all that different from medium and high stakes. The only difference is the players are just worse at micro stakes, which makes life way easier. All right, 1-2, you open to $10, 2 callers, 9-8-3, continuation bet, turns an 8, small blind, leads 20. Good use of the word lead, Michael. You got it perfectly. Yeah, crappy spot, right? You should definitely call, I think. Ace brings a flush, small blind bets again. I would probably fold river. Whenever the ace comes on the river, you're only beating the draws. And why? I mean, some draws should lead the river. In this scenario, your opponent should definitely blast the river if he has a full house. Terrible play with a full house. He definitely wants to get more money in the pot. And in that scenario, either you have an ace or nothing. But yeah, I think you're supposed to fold the river there, even getting pretty good odds. Recently purchased the Ultimate Coaching Bundle. Good. I'm glad that you're enjoying it. Oh, you say, sorry, it came 873. So now the guy was just overvaluing horribly. Well, that's always nice. Crypto dinner. I have no clue what you're saying. Maduk, if you message me on Maduka, if you message me on Facebook, there's a high likelihood I'm not going to reply. You need to message me on Twitter or send an email to support@pokercoaching.com. Facebook is a bit of a mess. Sorry. Let's see. We raised 3 big blinds on the button with 8 big blind calls. 10, 7, 6. He leads half pot. You call. Turns a king. Check, check. River's a 5. Check, check. That's fine. Nice hand. All good. All right. What else? We're going to talk about leading. Yeah, on the river when people lead into you, especially in the small stakes games, I would say in general, it's going to just be the hand they are representing. It's usually going to be just a pretty decently strong hand, like flushes or straights or whatever. So I think you should typically overfold. But again, if you have something like the nut blocker, you should be calling with your nut blocker almost every time. Like say you have the ace of spades and top pair, middle pair or something, and you're not sure what your opponent's doing, or you suspect they probably just have mostly good hands, but maybe they don't. They can't have a good hand all the time, right? Those are very good hands to look your opponent up with, because you do need to, quote-unquote, keep them honest. If you only call them when you have the nuts or flushes, then you're going to end up folding way, way, way too often in general. But again, if your opponents never bluff, can't make this any more clearly, if they never bluff, do not pay them off. You are spewing money by paying them off on the river whenever they lead into and like the obvious draw comes in. Now, whenever the obvious draws all miss and someone leads, they're almost always drastically over bluffing. So whenever it comes in, they usually just have it. Whenever it does not come in, they almost always don't have it. Because think about it, right? If they have top pair, it would be really dumb to lead into you when all the draws miss. Because if you have draws, your opponent has draws, you really want them to bet, right? So it doesn't make sense in those scenarios to essentially force your opponent to play well. So keep that in mind. That's generally leading in a nutshell. I mean, we could talk about leading for hours and hours and hours. Maybe I should make a long, in-depth webinar about it, but that's not what we're doing here. A lot of what we do here is actually just test ideas, see what all you think about them, see if we should go more in depth. You all really liked the discussion we had on poker player, what am I saying? On playing poker online from the United States. And so I made a video about it. It's already up on YouTube. You can find that at youtube.com/floattheturn. And everyone there is liking it too. What tips would we give someone for playing live for the first time? Just go there and have fun, enjoy yourself. Don't take it too seriously. Try to play well. Study ahead of time, right? All the normal advice. When you play, if you can run it twice, do we run it twice? Almost always never. There aren't a whole lot of reasons to run it twice besides decreasing variance. And I don't really care about variance because we're properly bankrolled, right? Also, it scares some people to have to run it multiple times. That'll make them be a little bit more cautious and nitty against you, which is good. You want people folding too much. Also, whenever some people lose, they get tilted. If some people get tilted when they lose, and you don't get tilted when you lose because you're properly bankrolled, you have a good mindset, then it's just a free roll, right? I mean, imagine 5% of the time your opponent just goes on monster tilt when they lose. Well, then clearly you should just always run it once. So no, running it once makes a whole lot of sense. If we make top set on 10-9-8 from the small blind in a 4-way single raise pot, should we lead? Probably. Clint says, you are test dummies. You got it, Clint. You got it. Let's see. Do you think it's possible to become a successful player if your memory is not that good? My memory is terrible. Not just bad, terrible. Let's ask my wife to see what she thinks. Hi, Amy. Do you think I have a good memory?
For poker?
No, I really don't. That's not true. I have a terrible memory. Every day, actually not today, Amy's going to be impressed. Almost every day, she wants me to, after I shower, to take a different towel and put it on the towel rack so she can use it. I get this wrong 90% of the time. I don't know why I can't remember to do this. I've started to figure out a method. I take the towel I'm going to use and put it in the sink. So I'm like, what is that towel doing there? Because it's terrible. I remember it when I get in the shower. Okay, make sure you use the right towel, but by the time I'm done, I forget. Here's Mr. Thomas, by the way. This is my little baby. He's a nice boy. D. Nelson says that some people will make worse calls if they don't mind losing whenever you're running it multiple times. That could be true. If people do call you way wider, that's fine. Typically, though, good players win because people fold too much, especially in medium and high stakes games. you'll see this across the board in the graphs of good players. Their red line, the amount of dollars they win for making their opponents fold, goes way up, and their showdown equity goes down. So ideally, you don't want people calling you. So if you don't want people calling you, running it once helps with that. If you expect to get called a lot, you have to rely more on just getting good hands, which does happen sometimes. Do I want to keep them? No. I'm doing a show right now.
Well, he's behaving. He likes it.
You like it in here? You have anything you want to say to that? Amy's here, but you all can't see her. That's fine. Can I comment on a hand from a game I did not watch? No. Let's see. What are the donks leading with? What are they leading with? You had an opponent lead pot, jammed 1.5 turn with 7s on Jack 7-5 Jack. Yeah, that's a pretty tough spot. I mean, you're certainly not folding. Remember the guy who's asked if what any advice I had going for day 2 in the tournament? He won it for $29,000.
Good.
And he says, good. Good thing you gave him good advice and not, you should have studied ahead of time.
What was his name? Something Williams?
Brian Williams, you got it. Wow, you're good. Amy actually pays attention when she's in here. Who'd have thought? I'm terrible with names. But yeah, the question is, can you be good at poker if you don't have a good memory? And I think the answer is definitely yes. You just have to understand patterns. Pattern recognition is very, very important in games like poker where you see the same or similar enough situations all the time. You're often the big stack but end up getting 3rd or 4th place. You're trying to protect. Yeah, I mean, you're probably playing just too nitty.
Want me to put him on his map?
Yeah. Bye, Thomas. I love you. Thank you for stopping in. Can you stand up? Look, Thomas is legitimately standing up on his feet. He's so tall. Can you say bye to everyone? Say bye. Bye. That's the best he can do. Because he's a little baby. He's almost 3 months old. Bye, Thomas. You're a good friend. See ya. Bye, Amy. Oh, let's see. Poker coaching looks strong on the broadcast. It did. Hope Frank isn't one of my students. He is not. We thought he'd get a lot of TV time, though. Do you think it's important to have a 4-bet bluffing range even at micro stakes? Online, probably. And listen, I don't think micro stakes are particularly soft online. I mean, sure, they're beatable, but I also don't think they're just like the softest games ever where you should never be bluffing. Thomas looks like Amy, James looks like me. I think that's probably accurate. Maduka, I'm not sure what you're asking. Send us an email. All right, good. Let's see. If you had $50, again, how would we go up building it? I would start playing sit and goes. I would immediately find sit and goes that we could beat for 10 to 15% ROI. We'd turn out $50, just like I did a long time ago, up to, I don't know, 5K. Then move to cash games. Then we grind it up. Chips are good for teething. I don't think so. Why is Phil Hellmuth so bad at cash games but so good at tournaments? Phil Hellmuth is a pretty great player at reading opponents who are not very good. Also, he purposely buys in late, which implies that he thinks he's not very good at deep stacked play. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. I definitely think, though, it's pretty clear Phil Hellmuth's really, really great at playing against bad players, or marginal players, or really just non-strong professionals. Gosh, 1 second. I can't type for the life of me. Support@pokercoaching.com. There you go. Okay, let's see. An idea that I speak about a lot is not forcing your opponents to play well. It seems based on the assumption that your opponents are competent or good. Is that correct? Ami, think about this, right? Let's say we're on the river, and my opponent has a busted flush draw. Okay? And I decide to lead all in with my top pair. You think they're going to call me with Jack High for a busted flush draw? No, of course they're not. They're going to fold Jack High. What if on the river the flush comes in and I lead all in with my flush? You think your opponent's going to call the all in with middle pair? No. I mean, if they're like the worst player in the world, maybe. But listen, I presume most people are not the worst players in the world. Okay? But yes, I mean, if your opponents are like legitimate 100% calling stations, they'll call that all in with Jack High. They'll call the all in with middle pair when everything gets there. Then sure, you're just exploiting a really, really bad player at that point, though. Let's see. Every big cash game guy seems to say that Helmuth is a fish. Every big tournament player seems to say Helmuth is a fish, yet he has pretty good results. Actually, he has pretty good results in medium stakes tournaments, which is fine, right? He's one of the bigger winners in medium stakes tournaments. He puts in a lot of volume, has great results. When I say medium stakes, I mean like $1,000 to $10,000 buy-in tournaments. I mean, to be fair, I have the same thing, right? I have great results, $1,000 to $10,000 games. When you start playing higher and higher, you're playing against the 15 or 20 best players in the world, and it gets way tougher. So ROIs go very, very low in those games. Like, no one has a big ROI. I mean, I understand some people do win huge, but ROIs across the board are quite low. Poker should have an awards ceremony for each year for the best category. They do have this, Darby. I actually just voted for it. I'm on the voting panel, or I'm on the nomination panel. The Global Poker League does this over the last few years. Maybe one day I'll win. They actually had like a popularity contest last time, and I was in the running. It was between me, Andrew Nemi, Doug Polk, and Dale Negreanu. We got down to the final four. Who knows what place I actually took, because they didn't tell us. But Andrew Nemi won, which is, perfectly good and fine. Wish I would have won, but I did not. I do have a bit of, I have gripes about some of their categories because they're not very specific. Like, for example, best podcast. The person who won the best podcast last time doesn't even actually have a podcast. It's more of a internet show. It's like, what is a podcast, right? In my mind, podcasts are mainly audio-only interviews or shows that are produced on a regular, consistent basis. And, some things are podcasts in my mind and some are not. I guess that's what it amounts to. If you can not even get it on your iTunes podcast application, probably isn't much of a podcast. That said, I'm not in charge of voting for who wins, and that's A-okay. Let's see. When you're grinding sit and goes, how many sit and goes were you playing simultaneously? 16-ish. Sometimes more, sometimes less. Jarvie, right now, there is no voting available. Currently, I was on the, I guess I'm not allowed to say if I was available for any of them. I was available for some of them, so that's good. They at least acknowledge that I have a podcast this time, so that's good. Will I be working with Gripst again? You see he has a chapter and he's selling a no limit hold'em. I'm going to be working with Gripst a lot in the very near future. He's going to be making content for us for pokercoaching.com starting very soon. He thought popularity contests ended in high school. I'll tell you what, I would certainly never be in the final four of a popularity contest at high school, but times a change. How do you stay hungry to win when you're worth millions? You don't care about the money. If you don't care about the money, it's like you're playing for fun anyway, right? And I mean, think about this, right? Like, how do these businessmen who have hundreds of millions of dollars, how do they roll out of bed to play only a 10K? Or only a 1K? Like, you see Kerry Cass, who has all the money. He plays $1,000 tournaments, and he just likes to play, right? I just like to play. What's the best way to train at poker? Pokercoaching.com. Go get your free trial. You can touch on situations where the village idiot is 2 seats to your right and the maniac is 1 or 2 seats to the left. Seems like you create a lot of hard three-way spots. Just play good cards. Just play good cards and it can't be that tough. Raise under the gun. Under gun plus 1 calls. You raise ace. You raise to 240. Comes Jack 8. Queen Jack 8. Should you check behind, I guess, 3 ways? Definitely should check behind 3 ways. Heads up, you can consider betting, but checking is also fine. How were you first introduced to poker? I was introduced to poker by a homeless guy named Jake who lived in the junkyard. We used to play Magic the Gathering together. I would drive him to his junkyard and I would buy him ramen noodles every night after we played Magic the Gathering. He would beat us out of $10 every week playing poker. He would win almost every time. He probably wasn't cheating, but he was probably way better than us. We were all 17 or 18-year-old kids. And I realized really quickly that this is a skill game, just like Magic the Gathering is a skill game, like chess is a skill game, etc. And so I started studying. And then I started winning some, and the rest is history. The story is so out there it has to be true. It is true. He looked like Gimli from Lord of the Rings. Let's see. It seems like the biggest sessions are ones where you set mine successfully against people who have aces or kings. That's definitely true. Aces and kings are hands you're looking to crack. I mean, these are like, whenever you show up early in a World Poker Tour tournament, $3,500 mine tournaments, you very often are just playing mainly to bust good hands. Have I ever seen Jake again? I've not seen Jake again. I don't know where he is. But that's who introduced me to poker. Jake, my Magic the Gathering friend. You do best when you catch timely cards. I mean, look, whenever someone raises pre-flop in small stakes games, you should be calling with all sorts of stuff, as long as the raise is not humongous. Listen, if people are raising at 10 big blinds pre-flop, you need to just be really tight, because when you get a good hand, you win 10 big blinds for free. But if they're raising a normal amount, so you can just call and then go from there. You downloaded the tournament app and you love it. Good, I'm glad you enjoy it. Do I still play Magic? Oh, yes. Here's Magic cards right here. We have Magic cards here. I don't even know what these are. I have a fun-looking Duress. I love signed and altered cards. This is a shell for, what is this? This is Legacy Storm. Ad nauseum tendrils. What are these? These are all cards I'm waiting to send out to get signed. I love signed Magic cards. These are all unsigned. Anyway. We love Magic the Gathering here. Empty the Warrens. We almost have this whole deck signed. Now I'm thinking about it. I think the only card we don't have signed is Ad Nauseum. But that's sad. I don't know why, but I love history, I think. I don't really like history, but I do enjoy the idea of someone made this, right? So see all these cards. Like, these are all signed by the artist, right? All signed cards. And I love it. I don't know why, but I love it. Hopelessly addicted. It's very important. Here's my advice for all of you. Find things that you thought were cool as a kid, and then forget about them. Because it'll take over your life. And there's no reason for you to do that. I was listening to a podcast, and this guy was saying that whenever he was a kid, him and his friends really wanted to get a stormtrooper outfit. And the guy lived his life really wanting a stormtrooper outfit. He finally got old enough and found a real stormtrooper outfit for $5,000 or something, and got it. And then realized, what am I doing? Why do I need a stormtrooper outfit? And you got to kill the stormtrooper, right? Did you see a Sarah Sankson in that unsigned pile? Probably. Seems like a good card to not have signed that I know the guy is signing. Let's see if you're right. I don't even know what's in this pile, honestly. That's signed by who? Cirilio? Something like that? Oh, you probably saw Caracas. Probably saw Caracas from Legends. Looks kind of like Sarah Sanctum. None of these other cards look like Sarah Sanctum. Sarah Sanctum? Which one is that? Maybe I'm thinking of the wrong card. Whatever. Doesn't really matter. Let's see. If you were to sell those Magic cards, how much could we get? I don't know if we need to say that in public. What's the best way to practice reading players who play balanced to understand their styles? I'm not sure what you mean by reading players, necessarily. I mean, if you're trying to get physical reads on them, I mean, you just need to pay attention, figure out what their baseline behavior is, and then adjust accordingly. When are you running a home game and competing again? I'm probably not going to be playing in it in the near future just because the timing does not work out for me. I have a poker app. Yes, it's called the Float the Turn Poker app. Float the Turn Poker. What's it called? Look up Float the Turn, see what comes up. Also, we have Insta Poker, where it's sort of like poker coaching, where there are lots of interactive quizzes. When's my next poker gig? I'm not sure what that means, Carlton. Yeah, Mark. Yeah, that's what I was thinking it was, and there's not one in this pile. I have these alphabetical by artist. I know who drew it. It starts, it's like Cirilio, C-I-R. And we don't have that here. Probably already sent out. Do we have any Power 9 cards? Ooh, yes we do. Let's see what we can find down here. Let's see. I think I know I'm... For those who can't tell, this is my vintage playset. Most of this is signed and or altered. What are we looking for? Power 9? We'll just go give you the artifacts. Let's see. This is what happens whenever you have too much going on in your life. Oh, I got the wrong box. Everything is organized. It's important to be organized in your life. Don't live life unorganized. Where are my Power 9? Huh. Did I lose them? That'd be bad. Oh, here we go. They're all right at the front. Here we go. We have a Time Twister. This is altered by Mark Tadine. There you go. All these are altered by the original artist. We have a Time Walk. Time Walk for Everyone by Amy Weber. We have an Ancestral Recall. Yeah. By Mark Poole. Okay. We have 5 Moxes. Okay, 5 Moxes. These all have little dragons on them by Dan Fraser. Yeah. The other ones. Then we have a Black Lotus by Chris Rush. Chris Rush is no longer with us, but there's your Black Lotus. For all the Magic nerds, it's important to not lose your Magic cards that are worth a decent chunk. Those are the ones I play with. I like them. They're nice. Like I said, I like signed and altered stuff. You bet James doesn't touch those. Yeah, it's actually funny. James has a little pile right down here. See that? See that white box right down there in the corner? Right in front of that, there's a pile of cards, mostly tokens, that James gets to play with. And somehow he doesn't touch any of the other ones. I don't know how. Maybe he's some kind of genius, I'm telling you. I was into Pokemon. Pokemon was a great way to turn your Magic cards into way more Magic cards. No more poker going forward. Yep, that's true. Mike says, come on, no one cares. Mike, you have to understand. A lot of people do care. It's very important to understand people, their hobbies, their inspirations, their motivations. Because everyone is motivated by different things, right? To be fair, this episode is about coffee. All these are about coffee. It's called A Little Coffee. Yeah, it's an interesting thing whenever you are known to be a poker person. Because I remember I one time posted a Hearthstone video on my YouTube channel where I got legend in like a day or something. And then it got like 15 thumbs down and only like 40 thumbs ups. I'm like, huh, people really just don't care. So that's interesting. Because it is very different to pivot, right? At some point, I may not become a poker player anymore, right? Probably not going to happen anytime soon, but at some point you need to pivot to other things. If it's in the public eye, ideally the people who like you from other aspects some of them will pivot over with you. Lots of you played Magic back in the day. Yep, Magic it's a fun game. Fun game. Looking through a pile of Magic cards. What else do we need to talk about today? I don't think much else. Whenever people lead into you, you need to figure out their range, and then you need to adjust accordingly. That really is what you need to do. Don't think that you need to act in a balanced strategy against everyone all the time. I think that's going to that will give you a lot of trouble. So anyway, figure that out. Don't do that. Someone else's trading site went downhill after they said they retired. I'm certainly not retiring, and I'm certainly not retiring from working to benefit all of you. I have way too much invested in the poker world at the moment to ever give up that. Let's see. The best way to improve is to sign up to pokercoaching.com. Very, very true. Do I know some player who plays Magic? No. You loved Fork plus Berserk. That's aggressive. You can Berserk 4 times and Fork 4 times a Curd Ape, and you may win. What do you know about the new generation of German and Swedish players, which are winning in the poker tournaments? I guess that's what you're asking. What do I know about them? They're all good. They all work together as a nice brain trust, and they all significantly improve their skills together. You watched my hand versus Sam Greenwood the other day at the Final Four, where I had a bluff catcher. It's probably your favorite hand that I've reviewed. Well, good. I think I probably lost. That's okay. Check Race is asking me if I play on a random, unregulated poker site. Go to jonathanlittlepoker.com/USA. I think that's the URL. Let's see if it'll work. I just made this yesterday. With any luck, it will succeed. Good, it works. It's a popular video. Already has a decent chunk of views. jonathanlittlepoker.com/USA is the answer to any question you have pertaining to unregulated sites in America. You're up 38 buy-ins since joining poker coaching back in November. Well, good job. Nice work. It's a lot of buy-ins. Poker's always fun because the money is always relative, right? Like 38 buy-ins whenever you're playing $1 games is only $38, but it's like a huge success, right? 38 buy-ins at 10Ks, only 38 buy-ins, but then you're starting to talk about real life changing money. 38 buy-ins higher is like really infinite. So anyway, good job, good work, keep it up. Do we play against the Germans? What are their strengths? They all play great. They play strong, fundamentally sound poker that is very difficult to exploit, and they make small adjustments to take advantage of whatever you are doing wrong. Really, they just play fundamentally sound poker against other good players, and they play it slightly better than everybody else. So that means that everybody else is going to be a small winner. What are my thoughts on Isildur? He seems to like to gamble. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, Ami says that he remembers from the Marie Kondo show, Tidying Up, which I watched whenever Thomas was a little baby. A guy was obsessed with sneakers, didn't wear any of them. Yeah, I'm obsessed with Magic cards, as you saw. I just had a whole pile of them. I don't think I've played I played one time in paper in the last year. And at least they hold value, right? It's not like sneakers that very often significantly depreciate. I mean, to be fair, I guess most Magic cards do depreciate, but if you're smart about it, you just collect the old stuff, and the old stuff appreciates, so that's very, very lucky. Is it fair to say whenever a player's playing 25% or 25 no limit or below, and someone leads the flop, they have better than top pair? No, that's not fair to say. That's a drastic over-representation, or that's a drastic assumption that is probably wrong. Instapoker? Yes, that's the site I'm involved with. What's my workout routine? Drink wine and drink coffee. I have not been in the gym like I would like to be. Every time something comes up, which means it's just not a priority for me in my life at the moment. And I should be getting back in the gym. I used to be in the gym pretty hard all the time, but now I have another baby. We'll figure it out. What's the longest losing streak? I've had 2 losing streaks where it was something like 40 tournaments in a row. How did I say positive? I realize that downswings don't matter. You're going to have them, right? It's obvious. Go to jonathanlittlepoker.com/bankroll and read that. People think they're supposed to be devastated, and you're not supposed to be devastated. Do you still play or just teach? I still play quite often. However, I just had a baby, and fortunately, I've played so much in the past where I'm allowed to take a few months off. Let's see. Virginia, I did not mention how to get money in and out of the sites. The sites all have deposit methods very clearly listed, or you can get money from other people. That said, don't keep much in there. Why do so many poker players play Magic? Is there a correlation? It's a good question. And the answer is essentially Magic is a gateway drug. It's a gateway drug to other strategy games. Magic is a very in-depth game. Masquerading is a child's card game, which is what makes it great, right? It's very, very deep. And really, it's much more difficult than poker, in my opinion. And if you can get good at Magic, well, you're probably going to be pretty good at poker. There are somewhat similar games where there is known and unknown information. This is why you very often see Magic players transition to poker way better than Like chess players transition to poker. Of course, some chess players do transition to poker, but it's like it's a farther away game than poker. Just like you see some basketball players transition to poker, but clearly chess is closer to poker than basketball is. Is stoicism good for you? Good for some people. I enjoy it. Going back to stoicism, Star's mentioning, like, should you feel down during a bad swing, or during a downswing? It's like, no. You should be working hard and studying. Did I play D&D? No. I like Magic because there's the wealth-building proponent of it. I mean, whenever I was a kid, I was like 12 years old or 14 years old, something like that, and I already had $5,000 worth of Magic cards and was grinding out Magic cards, right? I like the idea that you can actually win something. I have never been a fan of games where there is no actual potential to make a meaningful amount of money. I mean, the reason I still like Magic today is because you can buy a card for $1,000 and sell it for $1,200. Trop says your route was from chess to Magic to poker. Mine too. Exact same. Do I trust ACR? Absolutely not. Did you not watch the video, Star? Go to jonathanlittlepoker.com/USA. Please stop asking questions about American sites if you have not watched the video. What do you think about the value of this year's World Series of Poker? I don't know. Same as it's always been. All right. Did I get paid for commentating the ladies' night game? No. I got called about 4 minutes before that ladies' game was about to start. I was sitting up in my hotel room in a robe in the bathtub. Jesse Abramowitz called me and said, hey, you want to come commentate a game? Like, all right, sure. So I got out of the bathtub, put on some pants, and went to commentate. Seems like that's how a lot of poker commentating gigs get signed up. A lot of people don't think too far in advance, which, you know, makes it fun and entertaining. But maybe I'm just like the fifth backup guy. Maybe that's it. As everyone cancels, the big names cancel, and they're like, oh, John Little will do it. He's always in. We know he's sitting in the bathtub eating his cheesecake. But anyway, there it is. Why should you sign up to poker coaching instead of other various sites? Because it teaches you to play well in a manner that forces you to get in there and learn. All the other sites are very passive, right? And I mean, full disclosure, I'm members of all these sites for market research purposes. And Upswing is just generally basic. Raise Your Edge is very in-depth. I mean, like, look, if you told me you wanted to get a big full course and we're happy to pay $1,500 or whatever it is, then Raise Your Edge is a pretty good option. But again, it's just consuming videos, right? Poker coaching has interactive things. The interactive homework challenges are very, very beneficial for the students because it teaches you how to think about poker. And also the quizzes put you in real-world situations and ask you what to do. So, I mean, look, I made the site that I wish I had growing up. I wish I had someone to actually put me in the game and give me feedback in real time. There are tons and tons of sites where they give you videos and say, here's a video, have fun. But being put in there and forced to play real time is very useful in my opinion. How did I start playing Magic? One of my friends named Prabhu in 6th grade said, hey, you want to play Magic? We got Tempest starter decks, and there we go. What's my favorite bit of content I've made? I don't even know, man. The Bankroll Bible is something that maybe I think should get more, a little bit more of a push. Don't you start to reevaluate your game after 40 tournaments. You should be reevaluating your game all the time. All right, I have to go now. Instagram says I have 1 minute left. Hope you all have a great day. I didn't answer your value. You think there's plenty of increased value in the World Series of Poker compared to previous years? I mean, maybe. I mean, like, what do you want me to say? Like, sure. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I personally don't think the structure is going to be all that much better. They frequently give chips. Sometimes they give longer blinds. I saw 40-minute blind levels and 50-minute blind levels. That doesn't seem longer. They used to be hour and a half. So, I mean, would you rather have hour and a half blind levels with a shorter stack, or would you rather have 40-minute blind levels with a deeper stack? You're going to find the hour and a half is often a little bit better. All right, have a good day. Enjoy yourselves. What's today, Wednesday? Yeah, so we'll be back on Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern time. Sounds about right. Good luck, have fun, be nice to someone, enjoy yourselves, and I'll talk to you later.